Hello and welcome to C-Suite Secrets. I'm Heather Parsons, your host. I'm a serial entrepreneur, fractional CFO, and a business value strategist. I've spent years juggling business, family life, and helping entrepreneurs scale, optimize cash flow, and build real financial success. On our show, we bring you real conversations with founders, executives, and operators about what actually moves the needle in business. No fluff, no filler, just smart strategy, systems that work, and insights that you can put to use right away. With that, let's dive right in. Today on C Suite Secrets, I'm joined by Mark Lewis, best-selling author of Give a Damn, leadership coach, and CEO of Evolve Media. Mark built one of the South's fastest growing ISPs, helping transform Louisiana's tech industry, and now leads Communique LLC, a business consulting and leadership firm focused on culture, strategy, and growth. He helps CEOs build stronger teams and better businesses. Mark, welcome to the show.
Hey, glad to be with you, Heather. Thanks for having me.
So glad that you're here. I'm really looking forward to the conversation today.
Yeah, a lot of what you do sounds like what I do, so it's going to be a good interaction.
Yeah, we definitely have a lot of overlap. I think
Yep,
anytime that you're looking at business and making business successful, the more that you can marry together finance and operations and business strategy and value, better off the business is going to be.
absolutely.
So, to get us started, I'd love to talk a little bit about your journey and how you started your business and what led you here.
Well, like you, I'm kind of a serial entrepreneur. When I was growing up, I had a lawn cutting business. I had a newspaper route. I was doing all kinds of things. I was very, very active, and I always knew that I wanted to go into business. My dad was a consultant, and so I got an MBA at Tulane, and I started working for IBM. The goal was to get a lot of training, get a lot of experience from a company that's very well known for quality, and I thought I would do that for about 2.5 years and then go out on my own. But I lasted there 13 years because I did pretty well and they paid pretty good. But eventually I wanted to get out and I finally made that bold move in 1994 and I started an internet company when businesses weren't really utilizing the internet. We had AOL and Prodigy, but we wanted to provide internet connectivity. We knew that eventually the big boys were going to get involved. So we created a regional player and we sold that business 3 years later to a bigger player. And that just kind of spearheaded my entrepreneurial spirit. And so after that, when we sold the business, I went into consulting and did some things. And then to make a long story short, basically, I took over a nonprofit that was almost bankrupt because I wanted to help grow the technology industry in the state of Louisiana. We were 49th out of 50 states and you can't go anywhere but up, right? So we implemented some programs and did really well. So we went from 49th to 32nd over the next 10 years. But I always wanted to get back into the entrepreneurial world, so I went back into consulting, and now I'm involved with another startup. It's called Evolve Media AI, and it's an AI patented company. And I also do some CEO roundtables. I've been doing that for the last 10 years, where I help like you do with your organization. What you do for other CEOs is to help CEOs realize what the structure and the benefits and all the things that go into making a successful organization. And a lot of times you're only as good as your weakest link when it comes to business and finance and HR and all the things that go into make a successful business. So that's my passion.
I love it. I think we have a lot in common for sure. And I would love to also dive into your book a little bit and talk about how you weave culture into these roundtables and discussions as you're working with these tech founders.
Yeah, about 10 years ago, like if you told me I was going to write a book 10 years ago, I would have said, you're absolutely crazy. I'm not a writer. I don't like English. I wasn't good at it. But something just hit me, not only in terms of working with CEOs, but also what I saw personally in the environment. And we've become, in generally speaking, a more self-centered, selfish society where society say, what's in it for me? And so 10 years ago, I saw these circumstances and I took a dictaphone. And every time I saw something, I said, is that really happening? I record it. And so eventually I came up with a book and it had 60 pages of typewritten text. And I said, well, I got to translate this and put it into book format, and identified 9 areas of where our society has kind of gone down and what's contributed to our selfish, internally driven society. Look, you really, when I don't know if I could say the title of my book, but I'll let you say it. But
Yeah,
you
go
really
ahead.
care. It's called "Give a Damn: The Ticket to Cultural Change." Some people get offended by that, but anyway, the whole idea is, it's to make a statement. But identify 9 areas that have really caused it, and it really boils down to you really care about something when you can internalize something. Once you kind of get outside your domain, we don't care about things that are more outside our domain than internally. And I just had to write a book, and it's kind of like a calling card, but it's what I use actually when I do my CEO roundtables. Because the biggest thing is when you care and you deliver things for people and make them happier and they do the right things, they benefit and you benefit. So it's all about giving. You'll get more in return. Of course, you can get in the religious element about that, but I won't do that here.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love the book. I love the premise. I love all of that. And to be honest, I don't know about you and everybody else, but I'm too um, to be offended. You know,
It's true.
just to be honest. So I think having open, candid conversation is the best thing we can do.
That open mind mentality that you have and listening is a lost art today. Because what happens is someone says something and immediately puts you on the defensive. If you say something that's conservative, the liberal people think that's offensive, and vice versa. We have to open up our minds and look at what people and hear what people are saying and say, maybe there's a little truth in that. Maybe we can have a discussion without getting so polarized and divisive.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more, especially, and we see a lot of that in the media today. And I think as founders and leaders, people who are running companies, we have to address that in part of our culture, but we also have to focus on what we're doing. We
Sure.
want to make sure that our employees and the people that we're working with feel that we do give a damn, and that we're engaged and in it for something besides just us and our bottom line. But, it's a big ecosystem in my mind. We're all
That's right.
interconnected.
We're all interconnected, and that's a very good point. We're connected in some way, shape, or form on every one of us.
Yep, absolutely. And it's a small world, especially whenever you look in the tech space or other areas. Even coming from a large corporation that has hundreds of thousands of people, every job I ever moved to, I knew some of the people that were involved, or the people that I
Right.
worked with before knew them. So,
True.
one question that I have for you is around culture. So, if a small business is trying to figure out their culture and what they're doing with all the things going on in the world today, where can they kind of get started?
Well, that's a very engaging topic for me personally because a successful business, in my opinion, is all centered around culture. And I have a saying: you hire for culture, you train for skill. Now, anybody who's applying for a job typically has a certain skill set that they bring to the table. But the whole bottom line is this person going to be able to interact and fit into my culture? And so how do I make that happen? So I developed a very unique interview technique, and there's three avenues about a successful culture, and it's all based on hiring, retention, and even firing. Because the best way to lose A players is to tolerate C players. But let me get back to the
True.
hiring phase. In order to really understand about how a person thinks and how they react to certain things, like in an interview process, I developed this what I call prompts. So if I'm going to interview you, Heather, for a position, I'm going to say, okay, Heather, I am going to say one or two prompts, and I want you to tell me the first thing that comes to your mind. Now, we're not going to do this here because I'm sure we're limited time, but I'll ask certain questions, and I have a whole list of them. And one of the questions, and I'll give you several. On a scale of 1 to 10, how organized are you? Favorite color. When someone says red or blue, it says something about them. Other than a human being reincarnated as what? And you can go favorite sport or 5 words that best describe you, and favorite Disney or cartoon character. So all these answers in combination gives you an idea of how they think and how they react to that particular question. If you could tell if someone's going to get stressed out and thinking, oh my God, I don't know, I can't, they can't handle stress very well. All these little intricacies come in, and what happens, Heather, is you get a pattern of how that person is going to fit into your organization. I'll give you a quick story. There was a lady that was in my roundtable, and she wanted to hire this person. I said, Marie, before you do that, I want you to go through this process and get with your team and ask these questions. You don't have to ask them all. Ask 30 or 40 of them, and then see what they say. And so what happened was she wanted to hire this person. I said, don't do it. Do this first. She got her team together, and guess what happened? They didn't hire her because she didn't fit into the culture, and she thought she was perfect, but it didn't work. This is a very unique process to be able to find, and you'll know so much more about this person by asking these different prompts. And it's been very, very successful. So it's a little different. It's really unique. Nobody compared for it. You can't answer questions that the other person wants to hear, but you just hear what they say and how they react, and you're going to know. There's actually no method of measuring this, but you're going to know in your gut. And a lot of times, don't ever go against your gut, especially when hiring somebody.
No, I couldn't agree more on that. One of the questions that you mentioned there, I'd love to know your thoughts and dig a little bit deeper. So, on the color question, like what's your
Yeah.
favorite color? Are you looking to say, okay, the majority of the team has a similar favorite color and similar answers, or are you looking for something a little different?
One answer doesn't define a person, but it gives you reveals something about them. So let's take red and blue. Blue is a softer color. Red is a harder color. Red is typically a fast color. Blue is typically a slow color in terms of warmth. And so when someone answers red or blue, like favorite car, if someone says a Camry or they say a Maserati, well, that's a fast car and that's a color. If someone says reincarnated as what? Now, mine would be a dolphin. I say because it's always smiling, and dolphins, sharks don't like them. But if someone says a lion, it says something about them. If they say on a scale of 1 to 10 how risk-seeking you are, if someone says 10 and they're a sales rep, well, that's kind of what you want because you want them driven. If someone says, "Oh, how on 1 to 10, how organized you," and they're hiring for an accounting position, they say 3, well, that's a red flag, right? Because you got to have some of these things. So these all work together. There's not one answer, but you'll know based on the pattern. It's fun to do, and people come out of there and they say, one of the late came out and says, "Wow, that's the most fun interview I've ever had." That says something about them, and how they react or nonverbal. They may go like this, or they may go, "Oh," that says something about it. It's very unique. Look, you do 30 of these, you're going to find out exactly everything about this person. Like favorite movie. Someone says the 10 Commandments or someone says Aladdin. It says something about them, right? And then you
Yeah.
always ask why. A lot of times you ask, why did you make that statement? And if they don't give you an answer, there's so many things that go into it, but you're going to know.
I love that. No, I think that's great because as somebody who is a hiring manager and as an entrepreneur, these hires are super expensive. We work for a long time to deliberate on when do you actually hire? When are you going to bring these
Right.
people into your organization? So making a mistake here is costly,
It's
financially and
huge.
time, both.
It's huge in time and money because you onboard them, and the next thing, 2 months later, you got to get rid of them. You got to go through this whole process again. How can I eliminate that? Look, culture, to me, culture is everything. Now, you have to have an effective hiring thing, but you also have to have an effective retention strategy. And that's real important. You got to understand what motivates these people and give those things that will help motivate them. I think what CEOs don't do enough is to recognize and show gratitude to the people that do work for them. And there's just not enough. When we were at IBM, we met once a month, and they gave out awards, administrative and sales awards and technical awards. And that felt good because you want to be recognized, you want to be motivated. And that's a good feeling when you are, and it motivates you even further.
Absolutely. And I think back on that recognition thing, I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of these generations that are in the workforce right now. I believe that's
Sure.
becoming more and more difficult. And having a standardized recognition system is more and more difficult because some people value very different things. And I think as we have more generations in the workforce, it's even more complicated. So I'd love your thoughts on how you deal with some of that.
Well, that's a tough one because everybody's different in what motivates them. Some people like gift cards. Some people might like a day off. Some people might like some other award or just a name, their name on a plaque. It's hard to encompass everybody's motivational, but just the fact, even if just the fact that you say thank you in front of the peers is something that is appreciated. And we just don't do enough of it. Even this thank you note or even a written letter by a CEO to an employee said, you did a great job on this project. Just want you to know, Callie, that feels so good. Anytime you're thanked, it feels terrific. So you win, the CEO, everybody wins. It's just not done enough. Small things, getting like every year I send out to my team with Evolve Media, I send them scratch off cards, right? Lottery cards. It's something different, something unique, something that you go out of their way to show appreciation. Those are the kind of small things that people remember. It's the little things that people remember most that's so effective in an organization, how it builds the culture. And they all want to work together.
I love it. That's what you want at the end of the day. You trying to build that cohesive team so
Yep,
that it's not just some individual sitting in a silo who thinks about theirself. You mentioned being selfish and how culture has really evolved around that. I know in us talking in the past, you've also talked a little bit about still having that family atmosphere and culture at work. And I'd
right.
love to hear your thoughts on how to best get those two things together.
So there are two things that I've always helped other business initiate. One is establishing a set of core values for the company. So what I would recommend if you don't have core values, or even if you do and you haven't revisited it in a while, get your team together and I have a list of there might be 60 core values, single words, and a list that say, send this to your team, ask them to come to a meeting and you have your whole team and write down the core values that you think this company needs to adhere to. So you put them all on the wall. And then you might have 15 and you all get the team together and they all agree on 6 or 7 of them. And so now they've contributed to what the core values are of that organization. So they now feel part of something like that. So that's a good team exercise. Another one is establishing. I had it in my mind. I forgot about it. A start, stop, keep routine.
Oh, I
So
like
you
it.
ask your employees to say, okay, what do we need to start doing that we're not doing? You give them one or two. What do we need to keep doing that we're doing really well? Or what do we need to stop doing that's just not contributing? And so you have all these suggestions. You put them all on the board. You have a meeting and say, okay, what are the top 3 we need to work on over the next 3 months? So they all pick and they all can agree that these are the top 3 things. So when you work on that as a company and you address that and you fulfill those needs, they feel like now they're being part of something and part of a family that they're cared for. And that contributes to the culture and the teamwork and the development of an organization. And those 2 initiatives are really amazing in how they bring people together that we're all part of something that we've contributed to.
I think that contribution and being able to be part of the solution is huge for engagement and satisfaction at what people are doing. I couldn't agree
Right.
more with you.
Yeah.
One other thing that also comes to mind, I truly believe, my husband and I talk about this a lot, an organization can only be as good as its leader. So I'd love to hear what is one blind spot that you see a lot of times in CEOs that you're working with.
Well, when you talk about blind spot, I think one thing that most organizations, CEOs don't really think about is empathy. And then the other blind spot was giving credit for everything successful and taking the blame for everything that's not successful. So a CEO would give
Yeah.
credit to all the employees of anything that happens really well. But if something didn't work out, they say, look, this is my responsibility. Don't put the blame on anybody because you take the blame, but you give recognition. And again, that's part of the gratitude, but give recognition to employees. And also, when things go wrong, and you'll be empathetic. And it's called tough love, and you give them, okay, this didn't work out. What did we learn from this? And so you help them learn and to engage in when experience level that when a situation like this comes up, they know how to work it next time. So empathy and being able to showcase how important they are to the team by taking the blame and showing recognition.
I love it. I think that's fabulous. I've definitely seen good lead. I've been really fortunate to work with some really good leaders, and the folks
Yeah.
that are able to do what you're talking about are the people that you'd follow anywhere. I've had leaders that I would be like, okay, I hear you're moving. Like, where's your next landing spot? Where are you going, and how do I come along with you? So it makes
Yeah.
total sense to me.
So the definition of a leader is people who want to follow you. The definition of a manager is people that want to work for you. So
Ooh,
followers, you want people want to follow you and go where you want it, but a manager is somebody you work for. But a manager can be a leader at the same time, right? But those are kind of the two definitions that I see in a leader and versus a manager.
yeah, that makes sense. And it really resonates. And as I think about it, going back to something you said as we first started the conversation, those A players and those C players, it's where do you find them the most? Is definitely in my experience, it's with those leaders. They don't stick with them very long if they're not truly an A player.
You're right about that. In my CEO roundtables, I ask this question. You all know you have a decision to make, and you haven't made this decision in a long time. You need to come back and tell me what decision you're going to make and tell everybody in the roundtable what that was. And a lot of them say that they need to get rid of somebody who's a C player. Now, before you get rid of a C player, you could try to encourage them, and you try to develop it and try to make it where they can work, but eventually it's just not going to work. But people delay in getting rid of C players a lot because you don't want them to affect their family. They have it. It's just a lot of factors go into it. You hate to fire people because it's the worst decision in the world that you have to do, but it's in the best interest of the company. So you have to understand. And a lot of times people, when they make the decision to fire a C player, guess what happens? The A player said, oh my God, that's such a relief. It brings everybody up. And they're really glad that it happened. So a lot of times, if anybody out there, you all know, have a decision, whether it's firing somebody or whatever it may be, make that decision because it's going to be in the best interest. Don't put it off anymore.
Yeah, for sure. Another thing to kind of add to that, and I've seen this with folks who have worked with me in the past as well. Just because somebody is a C player on your team doesn't mean that they won't be an A player on somebody else's team. Because a lot of
Right.
times they may not be a good cultural fit. They may need that wake up call to say, okay, I've kind of been resting on my laurels and being a drag on the team. Now, can I work on myself? But if you never deal with that, I think that you
Right.
hurt the person that you're going to let go just as much as you do your A players.
So you bring up a good point. Is sometimes you may have people that are good people, but they're in the wrong seat. So how do
Absolutely.
I transition to get them to a level that they can be motivated? So sometimes there are people in the wrong seat that once you change and put them in the right seat, it makes all the difference in the world. So you got to a lot of times CEOs need to effectively look at your people, what they're doing, and making sure they're in the right seat that can be the most effective, not only for the company but for their own development.
Absolutely. And that development piece is another one that I could probably talk about for a really long time. As career professionals and as entrepreneurs, we definitely own our careers and own our business, but we also have, as leaders, we have a responsibility for our teams and to help them grow into their career. How do you see tech founders and entrepreneurs really leaning into that?
So in that case, communication with your employees on a regular basis is really important. And the question you would ask is, what can I do to help you in your development within this organization? And you'll get an answer. What do you like doing here? What do you don't like doing? And listening and communicating with the employee on a regular basis. It might be every 6 months, or do a performance review every year, but find out what they're thinking. Because a lot of times they won't tell you unless you ask. And that's just going to come out. That's why the start, stop, keep thing is going to be good because it embraces everybody. But sitting down individually with that person to say, okay, what do you like doing here? What don't you like? What do we need to improve on? And then take that what you've listened to and implement a plan for that development. It could be educational, it could be moving from one seat to another, or it could be not working with somebody, whatever it may be. Make those things happen because look, it's again caring about that individual, caring about the development, and then doing it. And that's the key behind it.
I love it. And that execution piece is huge for sure.
True.
Not just being somebody who's given lip service to somebody who says they want to grow, but
Right.
actually going out, even if it means that they leave your organization and your business, is it in their best interest? I think that goes back to that servant leadership and doing for
True.
others instead of just thinking about yourself all the time.
Yeah, that servant leadership is such a key word because if you help other people, you're going to benefit in some way because people are going to say good things about you and they're going to want to come work for your organization. So even though someone might leave, but they feel good about, hey, he wanted to support me. He knew this job was going to be better for me. He encouraged, helped me do it. And even if you fire somebody and they're a good person, maybe help them find a job. Look, let me see what I can do to help you get to where you want to be. It doesn't work. It didn't work out for our organization, but maybe I can help you where it works out for another organization.
I love it. So my next question, so as somebody who is definitely, you can tell you're very people first, having good culture, having a good organization, and now you're in the AI space. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how AI is changing a little bit of these organizations and culture and what you've seen on how to mesh it together well.
Well, when the internet came, it's supposed to change everybody, right? But the basic structure of how you run an organization doesn't change. It could be adapted based on AI or the internet or some, COVID caused everybody to make a change. But the way you put together an organization, how you run it, how you process, and how you do organizational development and doesn't change. Doesn't matter what industry you're in. It could be technology, it could be accounting, it could be manufacturing. The way it doesn't change. So you just have to adapt to be able to implement those structures and processes that you put in place that can accommodate your organization. So AI gives the ability for people to there's a certain part of AI I don't like because it's not you personally. Right now we're adapting. You're not. It reduces our creativity, but you can utilize AI to a certain extent, but then put your own spin on it. So I don't think AI is going to change how organizations run, but they're going to be doing things differently. But the structure you still have to do on a daily basis to make a company successful. It doesn't change hiring, doesn't change firing, doesn't change any of that stuff. It just gives you adapt. You have to adapt to those particular industries to meet what's best for the company.
I couldn't agree more. And another thing to kind of add on top of that, I talk to entrepreneurs about this all the time. Like 70, 80, even up to 90%, all businesses are the same. So whenever they
Right.
start working with somebody like me or you, they're like, well, I don't know, this may not work for me. But really and truly, at the core, every business has accounts receivable. Every business has accounting department. Every business has technology that they run on. May look a little different, but they're all making the same type of decisions. And I really believe that AI is just enhancing some of that. And where
Sure.
we're really going to see a lot of benefit is whenever we start using AI to solve some of our true business problems, not just correct our grammar in an email or do other things, but
Sure.
really using it as a technology to solve things that have been more difficult or you had to hire very expensive developers for in the past that now you can do a lot more quickly and a lot more cost effectively.
It's all centered around people too.
It
And it's the
is.
people that drive everything. And then once you take care of those people in various facts and how you do the things in encouraging and motivating and supporting and gratifying that is gratifying for these people, it's all based around the people. They're not going to change. You just got to find ways to motivate them and encourage them to be part of that team. it, that doesn't change, like you said, within industries. It's all the same.
For sure. So one other thing that I also think about is how to balance this innovation and profitability. Being in the tech space, I know this is a lot of times difficult, And in larger organizations, you bump up against somebody like me who is like, that sounds like a great idea, but how do we afford it? So how do we manage both of those?
Well, obviously, it comes down to creating a budget to figure out what your expectations are in the future, creating an incentive plan for people to meet certain criteria, and then rewarding them for it. Again, it doesn't change, right? From where you are, but I'm a firm believer that you reward people. Look, I don't need to make $50 billion a year as a CEO. I mean, to me, that's kind of crazy, right? Why can't I just share? I mean, you take care of the CEO, but why not? Why do I have to make so much money? I'm comfortable the way I don't have to make all that kind of money. But how can I incentive profits that we make and I can share it with the people that have gotten us there, right? I may be the head, but I want to share that with people. You're right. I'm very people oriented. I don't need to make a lot of money. I want to share our success because you're only as good as the people that do it. And if you don't have those people, you can't make that kind of money. So share it. That's just my opinion.
No, I agree. I think as a founder and as a CEO, we take a lot of risk to get where we're at. And I think we should be
Sure.
compensated for that. But I truly
Sure.
believe it, to your point, when we take care of people and we rise the water for them, it just elevates what they do for us as well. Not that we want to pay some astronomical
Sure.
fee for
Yeah.
a service they don't provide. I'm out
Right.
on that. But
Right.
whenever somebody is working hard and they're actually showing up and doing the things and going above and beyond, I couldn't agree more. Suit up,
It,
show up, pay them appropriately. And I'm a huge fan of bonuses.
right.
You can make that based on current situation. You don't have to budget for that, but it's a great incentive. And I think it goes a long way with people when it comes to job satisfaction and what their decision is going to be next time they get a DM on LinkedIn.
And you bring up a point where a CEO can be very transparent with his or her employees. It's like, okay, here's how we're doing. We're not doing very well, or we're not going against budget. My goal is to, everybody has an incentive plan. We make bonuses. We got to make this objective, and if we do, we do. Everybody wins. But there are times when times are tough, and people need to understand that you may not get a Christmas bonus every year. You may not get a bonus because variability in economies, all that happens. But if you're transparent, they understand it, and without trying to hide something. But what you're doing is when you do really well, it creates the value, enhances the value of your company. So your company's going to be more valuable, and therefore you're going to benefit in the long run. But how to get there is based on, I think, being transparent and making sure people are both good and bad that are understanding where the company is and where we need to go and make changes that we need to make too. It's
Right.
not
Because I
easy
think
when it's tough.
it is tough, but it goes
I
back to
know.
that buy-in, right? And
Sure.
I can remember an instance comes to mind whenever I listen to the news and I hear that the company that I'm working for is killing it, yet they're not handing out Christmas bonuses. Like, that's a rough feeling. But if you're actually really transparent and say, hey, this is where we're at, and they
Yeah.
can look, especially for anything that's publicly traded, you can go on online and look, and most people are
Sure.
smart enough to do that. You know,
Right.
the message and the behavior matches.
Very true. And the message that you provide, and the more transparent you are, the more buy-in you're going to have from the employees, the more motivated they're going to be. As long as you reward them, you do all the right things, you're going to have a very successful organization that's going to grow. And it's a tough thing to do because yeah, we do take the risk. And so we put up the money, we do all the kind of things, and people need to understand. And I think they do, but you and I are talking the same thing.
Yeah. And a lot of times people don't understand that as especially in the founder space, maybe you didn't get paid for 3 or 4 years or however
I'm in
long
that
it took.
position. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
in that position now with a startup. I've been paid in 4 years of this new startup I have, but and I've been borrowing money so we could pay the employees, knowing that at the end of the day I could be out a lot of money, but I think the risk reward there is important for me, and I'm probably more risk seeking than most people, but I see the value of where we're going. I'm willing to borrow money to be able to put in that value. And then, at the end of the day, everybody's going to be rewarded. So I know exactly where you're coming from because I'm in that stage right now.
Yeah, it happens. A lot
Yeah.
of us, unless you are a unicorn, we all go through it with the bootstrapping or looking for funding
Yep.
or something else.
Yeah. Oh boy, I so understand that.
Yeah. So, one other thing that I think about, and I think you're in such a unique position working with all of these CEOs. What are a couple of things that you usually talk to them about and some key pieces of advice to help them elevate and become a better leader?
Well, a lot of times, and I'm in my third session with the CEO roundtables now, you have to create a core foundation of your business. And that core foundation is to understand that you should have a mission statement, you should have a vision statement, and you should have a core values. So we go through this exercise where they have to create it. Some people have a mission statement, but it's so old, and redo that. And so by doing that, now they have a kind of a vision and a mission of knowing where they go. But more important, after we do that, we have a session on goal setting. What's your
Ooh.
big, hairy, audacious goal? BHAG. So they have to have a big. Where do you want to be in 5 to 10 years? What's your company look like? And so they need to put that down. And then they have 2 personal goals they need to come up with and 2 business goals. And so they're setting the stage early in the roundtable this month. They set the stage. And in June, when we graduate, I ask them how they're doing against their goals to make sure that they're adhering to them. In January, okay, well, how are you doing against your personal goals, which are typically 12 months out, and then your business goals are 12 months out. And your BHAG is obviously 5 to 10 years. And I go, okay, now that you've established your BHAG, how do we get to the BHAG? So you go back in increments of 1 year. And how did you get to, okay, I got to be here this year, next year I got to be here, and then I'm going to get to my BHAG. Those goal setting, which I will tell you, most CEOs are poor at it. They're not good. They don't use the SMART routine. It frustrates me because you tell them all this stuff and they're supposed to do it and they don't. So you help them through that process. So you set the foundation through mission, vision, and core values, and then you do the goal setting. And then the HR thing is a really important piece that we go, and this is the separate session on that. And then we have separate sessions on, thinking financially, those kind of things. So we set the foundation, then we go through these processes of how they can get better. And the most important thing, we ask them very early on, how much of you are working in the business versus on the business? And a
Ooh.
lot of times they're so ingrained in working in the business, so we're trying to transition them to working on the business to have strategic strategies in place, delegate some of the things that you should be doing to other people so you can strategically get to your BHAG in 5 to 10 years.
I love it. And that goal setting is something that is the very first thing I do whenever I onboard a
Yep.
CFO client. Because without that, you don't really know what you're tracking towards. You don't know where you're going. You
Exactly.
don't know if you're on track or if you're in the ditch.
Right.
So we're
Right.
trying to help folks get to where they really want to go. And I think a lot of founders don't really know. They hadn't really sat
You,
down long enough to think about it.
Correct. Say, okay, when you plan, let's say, I live in Baton Rouge. Let's say I want to plan to go to New York City. Well, am I just going to get in my car and go? No. How am I going to get there? I got to know what the path and the route is, right? So you wouldn't plan a vacation without knowing how to get there. And what the traveler is, you got to do the same thing. And I use that analogy. You got to do the same thing when you're doing goals for business. You got to have a path and a goal to be able to get there and a plan to be able to get there. And that's kind of, and they say, oh, yeah, that's a good, I get it now. It's a simple analogy, but it works.
For sure. The other thing that you were talking about a second ago is around not just doing goals, but really setting yourself up for how you're going to get there and all the next steps. So, as entrepreneurs and as founders, whenever we find ourselves working in the business way more than we work on the business, I really see a lot of issues pop up. This is where it's really hard for me to work with founders. And I'd love your
Right.
thoughts on this as well, because they're not really taking that dedicated time, and that it's
Right.
more about a mental break than actually anything else so that they can think about the business strategically. I usually recommend block at least half a day. I block a whole day during the week that I don't try to serve clients to do that. I'd love your thoughts on it as well.
So as an entrepreneur, when you start a business, you do everything. All right.
Uh-huh.
But what entrepreneurs understand need to understand is there is going to become a time where there's a paradigm shift in terms of doing everything and understanding that a successful business is run on structure and rhythm, and you have to set plans for structure and rhythm, which is very difficult for an entrepreneur to do. As entrepreneurs, it's hard for us to run a $20 million company because we're just not good at it. We're good at starting businesses. It's difficult. So most CEOs, because they're so engaged in that, need to understand, can they make that transition or paradigm shift? And typically it's anywhere from 1.5 to 2 million. Can they
Yep.
make that paradigm shift? And if they can't, then they need to get someone that they should hire to be able to do that, who can run a business versus start a business. Because a lot of people out there are great at running businesses versus starting. So you have to understand. And once they get that message, it's a little bit easier to let them to understand that that paradigm shift is something they have to do. And if they can't do it, they're not going to be as successful going forward. And that's the message I try to get across to them.
I think that's great. Like I said, I think you and I align on a lot of things, and
Yes.
our conversation today has been really valuable and great for me. I have one last question for you that I
Sure.
ask all my guests. What is one secret that you wish you would have known starting out as an entrepreneur?
Uh, wow, that's a great question. I am a guy that just likes to go. So one thing I've learned is to be a little bit more patient and to step back and to say, okay, just relax. Especially when you have issues that come up. Let me think this through more so than just going and doing. Let's see what's, multiple ways to be able to solve a problem. So I'm relatively impatient. I want things to go a lot quicker than they typically do, but to be patient, but also to step back and not be so charge focused is probably one thing that I've learned.
That's some great advice. I think most of us as entrepreneurs really need to do a lot more of that than we do. My husband says, he says, you like to leap. And I'm like, yeah,
That's
there's a
right.
lot of truth in that for sure.
That's true. Yeah. And I still have to like step back and when I get into that situation, what I do sometimes, Heather, is I just meditate. I just okay, just relax, think, do what you need to do, sit back in a chair and just forget everything. And then it comes to you basically.
That's a very good point. Yep. I think taking that time to pause is a huge blessing. And as you become more of a seasoned entrepreneur and you've been doing this for a while, that pause before you hit send on the email, before you sign the contract, before you make that decision, I think is huge. And it really eliminates a lot of buyer's remorse or
Right.
regret as you do things.
Yeah, when any and here's you brought up a point. When anything gets, when you have an issue and you want to address an issue, write the email and then go back, and go away and just forget about it and come back maybe 2 or 3 hours and then see what you've written to see if that's what you really want to say. So you make a good point because sometimes you write an email and you want to send it, well, maybe I shouldn't. No, it's a little too, just review it and you'll feel better about it. There's a couple things that you never want to criticize, condemn, or complain in an email. Never. You always want to have that positivity in it. Said, you did this was a great learning experience. Said you did a terrible job. No, this was a great learning experience. I know we're going to do better next time around, and I appreciate all your support. I used to coach little kids all the time, 13-year-olds, and I always say emphasize. And some people weren't very good. We had a game where the guy booted a shortstop booted, and everybody said, "Oh, we lost the game because." I said, "No, it was a learning experience. We're going to be better than that. We need to go forward. We all, this was a great team. We need to all work together as a team. Just because we make a mistake doesn't mean it's the end of the world. So you just try to keep being positive because you can be positive when something goes wrong in that perspective. So
Yep. Definitely get more flies with honey for sure.
exactly right. So
Well, thank you again. Before we wrap up, if our listeners want to connect with you and learn more about what you're working on, what is the best way they can reach out?
Well, they can send, you go to marklewisllc.com. It's got all my stuff on there. They can send me an email at mlewis, Lews, at marklewisllc.com. Or they, just email me up. I answer all my emails typically, unless someone tries to solicits all my time. But, to say I heard you with Heather, I thought it was good or whatever, just send me an email and I'll respond.
Well, that's great. Thank you again for being on, and thank you to everybody for listening to C-Suite Secrets. If you have found today's conversation as valuable as I have, it would mean the world to me if you would hit that like and follow button, or better yet, share with another entrepreneur that would find it valuable. And if you want more tips on how to grow your business between episodes, we'd love to see you on Facebook at C-Suite Insiders. And until next time, keep growing, and remember, you don't have to do this alone.